Hey everybody, it's Curse, and today I wanted to bless you with the epic hype that's coming in just a few days. And that is, of course, Last Epoch's 1.1 launch. It's a brand new patch, and it's called Harbingers of Ruin. And today I'm going to go over a couple of developer blog posts that they have posted already over the last 1 week. And I'll also be going over the patch notes on stream, and I'll see if I have time to put together a YouTube video about them as well, depending on how massive the patch notes are. I might just package whatever we do on the stream. But regardless, I wanted to share with you and just give you a reminder that July 9th, the patch is going to drop. There's going to be a ladder tracking everybody's leveling progression, and it's just going to be a blast. They're implementing so many amazing changes, and I wanted to go over them real quick here. And with that, of course, let me welcome you by saying, Irashimasu! So the first dev blog post is what's new. So in here, you can see I'll include links to both blog posts in the YouTube video description below. But there's a quick YouTube video with the official trailer. I'm not going to play that, but I will go over the 7 to 9 little points that they've made here about what's new and what's coming with the new patch. The first is an evade roll. This seems to have become standard for a lot of brand new ARPGs, including PoE 2, I think, has it, Diablo 4 has it, and so it's becoming a part of Last Epoch as well. It's essentially a dodge roll. What you want to keep in mind here is that new bosses being developed will have their attack animations and how much time they give you to get away from their AoE and whatever will be designed keeping in mind that you have this available to you. You only have a certain amount of time given the mobility assumed the player is equipped with. So evade is going to start with a 4-second cooldown. As you level up, the cooldown will decrease, and at level 100 you'll have 4 divided by 1.5 seconds cooldown. And so, you know, it's going to be a little bit lower cooldown, and you can decrease that cooldown even further with items. So they will introduce items that interact with this brand new mechanic, of course. So things like reducing the cooldown, things like giving you haste after you use evade right here. As well as, if you don't like evade, you can just replace it with summon crab. I'm not sure how they came up with this one, but it's gonna be a fun mini build to try out, just spamming summon crabs and seeing how powerful you can get them to be. But anyways, that is evade basically. It's gonna be available as soon as you start the game. Second is the Nemesis system. This is a random encounter that will be available as you're doing endgame content, certainly through Monolith, I assume through the dungeons as well. And what it is, it's going to be a little mini boss fight in which before you enter the boss fight, you have a choice of 3 options there between Banish, Challenge, and Empower. And those 3 options interact with the 4 items that are shown to you, that are drops that you can get if you kill the boss. So the Banish option is if you don't like the items and you don't feel like fighting the boss, you can just banish. It deletes the items, and the next Nemesis encounter that you get will have a brand new set of items, and you don't even have to fight the current Nemesis. So this is the option that if you've already fought a bunch of Nemesis and you're not trying to farm anything else that they might drop, and I don't actually know whether they have their own loot table or not, but if you're sick of them and the items are garbage, you can just banish and move on. Second option is Challenge, which is directly fighting the boss and getting all 4 item drops for yourself. And then the next time you run into a Nemesis, obviously it will have a brand new set of 4 items for you. And the final options, this is the most fun option here. This is what you use if the 4 items that you see have quite a bit of potential to become even better, and you want to try gambling a little bit and improving them. One thing you can do is click on this Empower button, and that's going to trigger a fight with the boss. The next time you run into a Nemesis encounter, he will have the exact same 4 items, so they won't drop after defeating the first boss. On the second boss, he'll have the exact same 4 items, and they'll be better. If they're unique, they might get legendary potential. They might get a sealed non-experimental affix. Alternatively, if they are rare or exalted, they might get forging potential or increased affix tiers, or even sealed non-experimental affixes. I think should be viable for those items as well. So all 4 items are going to become better. Now, you have to keep in mind that with unique items, there's still the impact of effective level for legendary potential. And the higher that is, the lower the likelihood that you're going to get an LP. And instead, you might just get a sealed non-experimental affix slammed into the item. And let's face it, sealed non-experimental affixes, they have a very high probability of being trash and not being exactly what you might be looking for within that unique item. But it can still be worth trying out for those high LPO items. And the best part, you can empower a set of 4 items twice. So if the first time around you didn't get the LP, you can try again. And hopefully that second time you get that LP that you're looking for. There's also a special unique called the Egg of the Forgotten. And if you see this item as one of the 4 items being displayed, you can replace it with a unique item from your inventory, assuming that unique item does not have LP or Weaver's Well. Alternatively, if you do not replace it, the egg is just going to change to a random unique item if dropped or empowered. And so this is a way where you can just take your red rings, replace the egg with the red ring, and YOLO the RNG in there to see if you can get a 1 LP red ring, or who knows, maybe even a 2 LP red ring if RNG is on your side. This is going to be a really good way to target farm legendary potential additions into items that you that you're target farming. For example, red ring, like I said, 1 LP red ring is not something that I would ever bother trying to target farm. It is just such a low probability to get that, I wouldn't even bother. But with this mechanic, I would definitely consider trying it out at least. Seeing if I can convert my existing red rings, if I've been lucky enough to get 1 or 2, into a 1 LP red ring, and then seeing if I can slam whatever affix I'm looking for. So this is, I think, a really cool mechanic. Anything to add to the item hunt, and hopefully not to overshadow existing item hunt strategies and existing itemization options. I'm all for it. I think this is cool. I can't wait to try it out. Next, we have Harbingers and the Forgotten Knight. Harbingers are part of the way and part of the path for you to get to the new Pinnacle boss. You have to defeat a bunch of Harbingers, and the first 10 unique Harbingers that you defeat, there's 10 for the 10 different timelines. Each timeline has a unique Harbinger. And the first 10 are guaranteed to drop an eye, which is the currency that allows you to fight the Pinnacle boss. Once you've defeated the first 10 unique Harbingers, the drop rate for eyes becomes lower from every single Harbinger that you defeat after that. So make your first Pinnacle boss fights count, because it's going to be more of a grind afterwards. And then there's the Forgotten Knight, which is a brand new faction that interacts, generally speaking, with the Harbinger mechanic, but also with some existing mechanics as well. And this new faction runs in parallel with your other 2 factions, whichever one you choose out of COF and MG. So you don't have to choose one of 3. You can run Forgotten Knights always, but also one of the 2 existing ones from 1.0. And here is the quick preview of the different options and different bonuses that you get as you level it up. You can see some of them interact with Gaze of Orobyss, some of them interact with Harbingers. And then once you get the eye, you can unlock the boss fight, the Pinnacle boss fight, but you have to defeat all 10 Harbingers first. And once you are in his domain, it's going to be an epic fight. And just keep in mind that the Pinnacle boss will not be available for legacy and offline modes until it has been defeated during the cycle. And this is so that it prevents people from just logging in with their level 1000 characters in offline mode and just clicking kill boss and spoiling the fun for everybody else. Another upcoming change is boss defenses are getting changed up a little bit. There was a dynamic damage reduction in the past, which made it so that if you deal too much damage, the boss all of a sudden gets, I don't know, like 50, 90, whatever % damage reduction, and just slows you down for arbitrary reasons that are not displayed to you, the player, in any way whatsoever, and they're not communicated. There is nowhere on the screen or on the health bar that tells you that boss gets 70% DR right now, so that maybe you should slow down and chill out. No, that was not visible. That was not available. So it was a very unpleasant mechanic in my mind. So I'm very happy that they're removing it. What they're replacing it with is basically a ward burst. At different points of the fight, based on the boss's HP, the boss is going to get a burst of ward. So right here, for example, at 75% HP, the Pinnacle boss is going to get a bunch of ward that you're going to have to get through before you can start damaging his HP bar again. Now, because it is ward, it's going to decay, so it's not going to be overly punishing for low DPS builds. You can just kind of kite around, run around in circles, wait for the ward to decay on its own, because the decay rate is essentially going to be out DPSing you anyways. You might as well just be running around in circles. Now, alternatively, if you have crazy high DPS, I suspect the ward isn't going to be too much of an issue to just burst through, and so you might just be able to down the boss fairly quickly anyways. So overall, I do like this change. It's very obvious what is going on. It communicates to the player what the defensive layers of the boss are. It's just transparent, and I like that very much. Good riddance to the boss damage reduction mechanic. Let's get rid of that. And just a few more notes here. They're giving bosses 50% more resistance to stun and freeze, reducing the effectiveness of slow and chill by 50%, and just overall trying to make crowd control locking impossible by adding a maximum stun and freeze duration to powerful endgame bosses. The next thing that they're introducing is a brand new glyph, a glyph of envy, which is a way to essentially speedrun your monoliths. Running monoliths, especially of brand new characters, has been the worst experience in Last Epoch. Such a slow progress, and I have certainly always hated it, so much so that I rarely leveled up new characters, at least not nearly as much as other streamers, that's for sure. I think this is a really good introduction to try and alleviate some of those issues. It basically gives you timeline stability, especially if you have not completed that timeline yet. On a brand new character, you get to normal monoliths, you just pop one of these glyphs into an item, and you can read how it works exactly with items, but essentially it's going to allow you to get to the boss fight of that normal monolith right away, and then go to the next normal monolith. So that should cut the time to do normal monos from, I don't know, 5 to 7 hours down to maybe 30 to 60 minutes if you have all the glyphs and everything else in a strong build that is full of items from your other characters. So this is a great quality of life improvement. I cannot emphasize enough how much I love this. It will actually incentivize me to level up brand new characters more so than I currently am. That's fun. I might just make more than one character in this patch. Next we have Harbinger's Needle, which is another way to expedite your corruption gain in this scenario. So once you get to 100 corruption, empowered models essentially, you can get a ton of Gaze of Orobyss stacks, 3 each, if you're equipped with this Harbinger's Needle once you kill the timeline boss. Keep in mind that Gaze of Orobyss is being reworked now, and so it no longer has diminishing returns. So the 3 additional Gaze of Orobyss stacks are going to each one be giving you quite a bit of corruption increase. So that's very important and relevant to this item, and that is actually in the next dev blog post. This is another quality of life improvement in gaining that corruption and just getting as fast as possible to the true level that your character can handle. So I'm a big fan of this one as well. Let's keep going. New uniques. And when it comes to every single patch, one of my personal favorite things to do is just look at new uniques. And that's always the case. Even when I'm learning more about a brand new ARPG, one of the first things I do is I just open up the page with all the uniques. It doesn't matter what game it is, PoE, Diablo 3, 4, 2, whatever. I like to look at all the uniques and see what catches my attention and see what looks fun, what looks like it might spark an idea for a fun build for me. So every time I get to see new uniques, it's the best thing ever for me. So I'm quickly going to go over these just for funsies. And we have here an Event Horizon, Two-Handed Mace, Slow attack speed, great damage, increased melee stat chance. Those are just standard. Some move speed, more damage to slowed enemies. But more importantly, you can see some lines here like penetration against all resistances with melee damage. A very high value, 55%. This is very significant, especially for builds that don't stack too much pen. And that is most melee builds. When you use a melee attack and hit at least one enemy, you gain a stack of dilation up to 10. Each one giving you 15% more melee damage per stack and 5% less attack and cast speed per stack of dilation. And 5% less movement speed on top of that. So at 10 stacks, you do 2.5x the damage, but you get 50% less attack and cast speed. So it's kind of like a 1.25x multiplier at 10 stacks. Yeah, you can get more out of this if you can trigger your melee attacks and not have to actually go through the attack animation nearly as much as just being able to trigger them through some skill or through some item or whatever it may be. Attacks that get triggered are going to be synergizing with this item more so than other just attacks that you have to normally go through the attack animation with. And let me show you something really funny about how math works out here. 15% more melee damage per stack of dilation. This is essentially a diminishing returns impact as you scale more stacks. Because with 0 stacks, you have 100% damage, right? With 3 stacks, you have 145% damage, essentially. And if you go from 3 stacks to 4 stacks, you go from 145 damage to 160 damage. So 160 divided by 145, it's essentially roughly a 10% increase in damage. So every single stack after the first one doesn't actually give you 15% more damage because they're additive with themselves. You get diminishing returns on the damage side. However, on the attack speed side, because it reduces your attack speed from 1 then to 0.95 to 0.9, etc., down to 0.5 at 10 stacks, that is actually worse with every additional stack. So not only does the damage improve with diminishing returns, the punishing side gets more punishing as you increase the number of stacks. So here's the quick math right here. If you have no stacks of dilation, obviously you do 1 damage and your attack speed is just 1, assuming 100%, let's call it here. Your damage multiplier is 100% of your baseline, right? Now, as you get each additional stack, you can see we're going from 0 to 1 to 2 down to 10 stacks. You can see how much your damage increases despite the decrease in attack speed. You can get a 9% increase in damage going from 0 stacks to 1 stack. So here's that differential, 9.25%. If you go from 1 stack to 2 stack, you're only getting a 7% increase in your DPS, assuming you're staying at 2 stacks, of course, and you're just hitting stuff at the exact same damage multipliers and attack speed multipliers at 2 stacks. And if you keep going, you'll notice that going from 7 to 8 stacks actually decreases your DPS. And then it gets even worse than that. Going up to 10 stacks, your effective damage, if you're just right-clicking and you're not proccing or triggering anything, your damage goes down from the high point of 1.3325 times your baseline damage to a 1.25 times. So you're losing something like 7-8% DPS by going from 7 to 10 stacks. And obviously keep in mind that this is assuming you're just right-clicking with one single attack. There's nothing fancy going on. You're just clicking stuff. So this is why I really dislike mechanics where your attack speed gets decreased like this multiplicatively. And it can get added on top of each other in a way where it's 5% with 1 stack, but 50% at 10 stacks. Losing 50% of your attack speed is massive. To further demonstrate, think about going from 0 stacks to 1 stacks. That is essentially a loss of 5% of DPS, just based on the attack speed decrease. Now, if you go from 9 stacks to 10 stacks, you're going from 0.55 of your attack speed to 0.5 of your attack speed. You're losing about 10% of your attack speed at 9 stacks. This is what I mean by the returns becoming worse and worse. If you were able to get up to like 20 stacks, you can notice that it gets extremely ugly as you go down to 20 stacks. You have no attack speed. At that point, you deal no damage. Obviously, that's a silly example, but my point here is that mechanics that introduce less attack speed can be pretty dangerous. So keep that in mind. This has to be synergized with things that proc, I think. But it does have a lot of potential. The more damage multiplier is significant. 2.5x the damage is quite sweet. And on top of that, 55% pen. It's solid. Next, we have Wall of Nothing. It's a unique body armor. And it's essentially a 12% damage reduction because it has a 12% chance to take 0 damage when hit. 12% damage reduction is great, and it has a bunch of other bonuses as well. So this is a decent armor. The levels are higher on both of these items, so I'm assuming the effective level for legendary potential is going to be pretty high. So you're not going to get more than 1 or 2 LP for these, I assume. I think this is a decent armor. The only thing I would note is it's yet another mechanic that deals with hits, and it does not address damage over time. And I think Last Epoch has been a bit notorious about not giving the player many options to mitigate damage over time. So hopefully we get some items that mitigate damage over time as well. Next one is Aberoth's Command. So this is the brand new Pinnacle boss's scepter, and it makes Void Cleave now instant, and it's no longer a movement skill. So that can be interesting, empowering your Void Cleaves. No longer has weapon requirements as well, because if you remember, Void Cleave requires a two-handed weapon, and this is a one-handed weapon. And it makes Ravaging Auras, created by your Void Cleave, last an additional 8 seconds, and have 40% Void Pen. Is that enough to make Ravaging Auras decent? I'm not even going to say good. I'm saying decent. I'm not sure. I would have to maybe test it out. It has a bunch of damage over time, area of effect, Void Pen. These are not insane numbers. They're solid. They're solid for sure. Maybe it makes Ravaging Auras viable. One thing's for sure though, you might still struggle with boss fights, because Ravaging Aura is a damage over time effect. It might be something that you run in monoliths. This might be a good weapon for just zip-zapping through monoliths. And the last unique item that they have revealed for us here is this unique quiver. Phase point, bow damage, bow stun chance, dodge, not crazy number. These are decent numbers, right? Chance to gain Dusk Shroud on dodge. So keep in mind that this is not the dodge roll. This is not the evade roll. This is on dodging enemy attacks. That won't happen too often versus bosses. So anytime I read an item, I kind of think about it. Is its special effect going to be applicable on boss fights? And these kinds of effects, anything that says on dodge or on block, those are low utility for boss fights. Nevertheless, it could still be solid for mono clears, because you're going to be dodging a lot, lots of enemies hitting you, and you're going to be zooming. And in those scenarios, getting extra Dusk Shrouds and gaining Black Arrows for a more zoomy gameplay experience could be solid. Anything that interacts with Dark Quiver and Black Arrows, right now, I don't think that skill is in a good place. So I'm a little bit skeptical when it comes to this skill, unless it gets reworked, of course, a little bit here and there. But these are the 4 uniques, and those are my thoughts on them. Now, let's go into the second post as well. It looks like this is going to be a pretty long video, so let's just keep zooming. Changes to blessings. We finally get to memorize the blessings that we've unlocked or that we've RNG'd into by fighting bosses. So let's say you're fighting Fall of the Oracle. If you've unlocked 100% roll on every single blessing, well, now you can freely just change from one to the other by paying a little bit of gold. I guess that's not free, but it's as close to free as you can get. 10,000 gold is nothing. This is phenomenal. I can't tell you how many times I held back on respeccing my Lightning Sorcerer into, let's say, a Cold Sorcerer, even though I wanted to play Cold Sorcerer. It's something I really wanted to try. But I didn't feel like respeccing because I worked so hard to get my perfect lightning rolls on my blessings that I wasn't going to let them go. I was more likely to just create a brand new character instead. And I wasn't willing to do that either. So what ended up happening is I never got to experience parts of the game because of that. And they've essentially outlined this exact scenario right here. The prospect of giving that up, meaning the blessing that you've worked so hard to attain, to try out another build can be daunting enough to discourage experimentation. So they couldn't be more accurate on this one. Discouraging experimentation is one of the worst things you can do in an ARPG. I'm very happy that they figured out, especially given that Last Epoch, one of its greatest strengths is experimentation. And it is how much freedom a new player has to just try and make their own builds. It's not like PoE. It's not nearly as punishing, where if you brick your build, you might as well just start a new character. And I think that's by design. PoE wants you to start a brand new character and suffer through that campaign and leveling all over again. And that's just what they're going for, and that's totally okay. I think depending on the player base, a lot of people enjoy that. I personally do not. I want to experiment. I want to try new things. Anybody that's watched my stream can tell that, I can't stay doing the same thing for too long. I just keep trying different stupid stuff. And eventually we land on something cool and something strong and something that we can share with everybody else and enjoy. So great change overall. I cannot just stress how awesome this is. But anyways, I'm not going to go through it in all the detail. Next, we get ladder improvements. So on top of the arena ladder, we now have a leveling ladder. So as we're getting to level 100, it's going to track everybody's levels so you can see how you're faring versus the rest of the world. And we don't have to rely on third-party websites. Everything is in the game. Everything is available, normal, hardcore. And based on my experience, this was always one of the most exciting things about a Diablo 2 ladder reset. How you're faring versus everybody else's leveling progression. And going like, oh my god, I'm top 5 druids. And of course, it's because nobody starts druid at the beginning of a Diablo 2 season, but still, top 5 druids or top 3 barbarian, whatever. And it was always so exciting to check and actually realize, hey, I'm not doing that bad compared to the rest of the world. So we're going to get that in Last Epoch as well. It's going to be a leveling ladder. Well done, ESG. Hats off. This is a great change. Next, we have Monolith timeline search. Here you can click on these little buttons to look for Monolith timeline nodes that have uniques or keys or set items or shards or tomes of experience, whatever it is. Or you can write stuff in the little text box as well. For example, if you want bows, the little buttons don't have bows, but you can type bows in here and that should highlight this bow right here. The only complaint that I have with this little change is that the highlighting, the search highlighting, it's not very easily visible. Maybe I'm just being picky. We'll see how it ends up when the game launches. But I would just love it if these circle thingies are a little bit more explicit, a little bit more visible, more highlighty, just extra emphasis for blind old people like me. Loot filter improvements is the next thing that we're getting. It gives you the ability to add multiple affix conditions to a single rule. And more importantly, we're finally getting legendary potential and Weaver's Will filtering. This is great. However, I did hear that you won't be able to filter for legendary potential being 1, 2, 3, or 4. It's just a true or false legendary potential filter, which it's not nearly as valuable as being able to filter 1, 2, 3, 4 LP. If that's the case, I feel like that's a big miss. And quite frankly, there's no way you missed it. I feel like it must be a resource decision where they decided, let's just do a true or false Boolean and maybe upgrade it to LP 1, 2, 3, 4 at a later point in time. Because, nobody cares about true or false legendary potential. Most people care about, for this specific item, I want it to be 4 LP. And for that specific item, I want it to be 2 plus LP. And I don't care about anything lower than that. There should be basically a filter with every single unique item in it that says, for this unique item, what LP are you looking for? Or do you want to just hide that unique item altogether? That is what I'd like to see. But yeah, that sounds like a lot of work, especially when they keep adding new unique items every patch. So I don't expect that coming out maybe ever, but that's like ideal outcome, best case scenario kind of thing. And next we have item faction changes. So Merchants Guild, they're kind of reworking a little bit what you get at every rank. I'm not going to go into too much detail on these. They're moving some stuff so it's available earlier. They're splitting certain other things. Now you go up to rank 12 instead of rank 10. Same with COF. Certain things are getting moved up, certain things are brand new, certain things are getting moved down, so they require a higher up rank. And then at the end you have 12 ranks. So again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on those. I think fine-tuning is great. Now, Gaze of Orobyss changes. This is something else coming with Gaze of Orobyss. It's always going to be 12 corruption. It will not have diminishing returns. I think this is another good change. Makes corruption raising easier so that you can get to the point where the game is challenging for your character, for your build, for your current level of itemization. You can get to that point faster, more efficiently, and not waste your time trying to grind that corruption up. The only thing is now you're going to have a max of 4 stacks of gazes that you can use up in one go. So you can raise the corruption only 48 at a time. And I mean, I say only, but I think that's perfect. You can quickly go through a bunch of 48, 48, 48 raises, plus whatever extra corruption you're going to get from killing the Shade. Another thing to keep in mind is if you die to the Shade of Orobyss, you're not going to lose all of your Gaze of Orobyss stacks. You're just going to lose one. Another good change. I like it. Now they're going over some class changes. The first one that they highlighted for us is channeling skills are being reworked. And where they previously prevented you from regenerating mana, now they will allow you to regenerate mana while you're channeling. However, that amount of base mana regen of 8 gets added to the mana cost of every single channeling skill. The interesting thing here is you can scale up your mana regen so that you can actually generate 16 mana per second and overcome that 8 mana cost increase for your channeling skills. So I think overall this is a good change. Channeling skills aren't seeing too much use in the game just because of how debilitating they are in just preventing you from moving. They're not too zoomy. You can't dodge enemies while you're channeling, obviously. And yeah, just overall, they don't feel great right now. So this is a welcome change in my humble opinion. Now they go into highlighting certain skills that are being changed, like Disintegrate. They're going to remove the Gambler's Fallacy and Ingvar's Head interaction, which essentially gave you like a 10x damage multiplier for your Disintegrate. And it was the only way to make Disintegrate viable. I think they have the right idea that this was too prohibitive in that it was the only way to build Disintegrate. So this interaction, keeping it in the game, probably was not the best thing. Maybe they could have nerfed it a bunch and kept it in the game that way, but I do understand the need to make more builds viable. That's always a good thing. So they're increasing the base damage of Disintegrate and the damage multiplier as well from 300 to 480. And then they highlight certain skill nodes. Here are a few of them. None of them are particularly insane. I'm not going to highlight them for that reason. Then we have Shield Bash. It's also getting a little bit of a rework. The main thing here is that you reduce cooldown by stunning enemies, even if you don't stun them with Shield Bash. Even if you stun them with something else, that reduces the cooldown of your Shield Bash skill. So that's a cool little interaction that you can take advantage of with other skills that have a high stun chance. And then they highlight a few different skill nodes in the Shield Bash skill tree. Flurry of Blows removes the cooldown out of mana cost, no stun. Indomitable Force, which gives you extra flat damage per block effectiveness. And a few other ones here that I'm not going to go into too much detail. Avalanche. Now, Shaman has not been seeing too much success as a class and as a archetype in Last Epoch. Partially because the passive tree has been fairly weak, subpar. Partially because some of the skills like Avalanche have also been subpar. So I'm happy to see that they're trying to address that they're trying to make Shaman more of a one-trick pony with the Thorn Totems and giving it a few more valuable options to play around with. It actually looks like it's going to deal fairly significant damage now. It's going to have 800% effectiveness on the first giant boulder that drops, followed by 10 smaller boulders at 400% effectiveness. Keep in mind that one cast will spawn all of these 11 boulders. One cast is 50 mana, however, but there is no cooldown. So you can spam Avalanche, and against large hitbox bosses, where presumably you can hit all of the small avalanche rocks and boulders on the enemy and just have 11 hits on a single enemy, that's going to be crazy DPS, assuming, hopefully, there are some more damage multipliers in the skill tree as well. Hopefully the skill tree gets some more damage love, okay? It needs it. It definitely needs it. Otherwise, just the flat damage percentages is not enough. It's not enough. Excavation, here's a few other skill nodes that are being highlighted. You can proc upheaval with your avalanche. This is a really important one if you're going to be doing an avalanche build. You're going to want to have plus 9% base crit chance. And here they're trying to introduce some synergies with storm stacks. Then we have passive changes. So they go over a few different passive examples of changes to passive trees for Sorks, Forgeguard, and Shaman that they're working on. Now keep in mind, these are not all the changes. These are just certain passive nodes that they're highlighting. Some of them are replacing existing passive nodes, like Arcane Current, I think exists already. Mana Shell, I think exists already, but not Mana Well. So some of them are brand new, some of them are replacing existing. For example, Dragon Breath is replacing a very trashy passive node that nobody ever used. So it's good to see. Again, I'm not going to highlight these in too much detail. We might make builds based off of these in the near future when we see patch notes. I'll just say I like seeing percent mana increase in the sorcerer skill tree, given that the sorcerer is supposed to be your mana class, your mana stacking class, and it just had a bunch of flat mana. Flat mana is never going to be as good as percent mana. For mana stacking, this is going to be a must-have node right here. Then we have Forgeguard, a class that has needed love for a very long time. I read through these previously, and the one that stood out to me was Champion of the Forge. However, I think the way they've written it in here is deceptive, because chat, when we were going through it on Twitch, told me that even though it says your critical strikes deal more damage, multiplicative with other modifiers, this is actually just straight up crit multi, additive with your existing crit multi. It is not a multiplicative impact. It's just additive crit multi. So it's not nearly as good as I thought it would be, but it could still be decent for strength stacking builds. So if you're running two-hand and stacking strength, you probably want to be speccing into this for 5 points at least. Then for Shaman, I'm not going to highlight these too much. Again, I'm definitely considering an avalanche build for Shaman and thinking about whether that is something I can run as a season starter. Definitely considering Sork mana stacking, given that it's getting some love, and I had a lot of success with Stork mana stacking in the past and a lot of fun as well. So those are a few build options that I'm keeping in mind. I don't think I'll be going Forgeguard just yet. I'm not going to write it off right now, but Sork and Shaman are looking spicy. Then they're rebalancing Ward. If you recall, they added percent missing life gained as Ward, affix on gloves, and that was one of the things that pushed Ward to be just straight up a lot better than life stacking. And ever since then, Ward has been the dominant strat to tank up your character. In the new world, you can see Ward decay. These are Ward decay graphs. The old one is the red one, the new one is the green one. And you can see that we're actually better off with the new updated graph if our Ward stays below 4,000. And then if you go above 4,000 ward, especially if you go up to like 20,000 ward, your ward is going to be decaying significantly faster compared to previous states of the world. You can actually check this out in Tunk Labs. They've updated the calculator in there. And I looked into it. Basically, I recall with my strength and int stacking earthquake build for Primalist, for Beastmaster, I was able to get like 15 to 20,000 stable ward with fairly optimized items. And I checked with the exact same items. In the new world, that 20,000 stable ward is going to translate to 12,000 stable ward. And that is with very optimized items. If your items are not as optimized, you're probably looking at 8 to 10,000 ward with an Earthquake Beastmaster setup, low life, of course. Ward is definitely going to get hit fairly decently. We might get new build archetypes that stack health and ward at the same time, and don't try to go as crazy on the ward. The only thing that I was a little bit curious about, looking at the formula that they've provided here is it doesn't seem to contain ward decay threshold. I kind of think ward decay threshold, you know, not exactly as is perhaps, maybe divided by 2, maybe whatever. But ward decay threshold, I was hoping would be embedded in the formula here somewhere, just so that you gain benefits for your ward decay by stacking ward decay threshold. You know, that's something that I'm a little bit disappointed about. I was hoping to see that in here. I think that's a missed opportunity to make ward decay threshold a little bit more exciting and a little bit of a better option in terms of providing you defensive layers compared to just stacking straight up ward. But overall, this is a very necessary change. It's a step in the right direction. I'm not sure that it's going to alleviate all the issues. We will see. Let's see how it plays out. And I think that's it. That's everything for the 2 blog posts that they've shared with us so far. To wrap things up, I'll share with you my plans. So I'm not going to be prepping and just having a perfect leveling plan for my 1.1 launch. I'm just gonna kind of YOLO it. I will try to plan out a build for my 1.1. So I'll try to have a build planner ready, assuming that they update the early build planner with the 1.1 version in here. So as soon as they have that, I'll start playing around with it. And I'll try to share something on YouTube before the launch, just so everybody else can consider at the very least whether or not they want to run the same thing I'm running. But again, I'm not going to be trying to polish my leveling as much. I'm just going to enjoy the game a bit more in a less polished manner. Just trying to YOLO in there, you know? Before 1.0, I was grinding Last Epoch for like a month prior to the launch. So by the time the launch came around, I'd played it so much that it wasn't as enjoyable as if, you know, I just jump into it blind. And so I'll try that out and see how it works out for me. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking at. We'll definitely be reviewing the patch notes live on Twitch as soon as they come out, as soon as I get an opportunity, of course, given the workday. And then once the patch notes are out and the game version here has 1.1 available to us, we'll be trying to make a new build for 1.1. And we'll see what we want to season start with. It should be exciting. That's what I'm most excited about. So mark it on your calendars. July 9th is the day that 1.1 is coming out. I'm going to be taking a couple of days off of work, not the full weeks, just a couple of days. And I'm going to be streaming pretty much most of the first day. And we'll see how much of the second day, but a huge chunk of the second day as well. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to it. It's been a while. I actually really appreciate that ESG have taken the time to sit back and polish as much as they can what they're going to be releasing on July 9th. I'm always a proponent of taking as much time as needed to create a polished product that everybody can enjoy and not have a frustrating experience. So I'm just hyped. I hope you are as well. And I hope to see you all on July 9th to enjoy some Nemesis fights in the 1.1 patch as we grind to level 100 together. Anyways, take it easy and gochiso sama deshita.